so much, Brian and Elizabeth. It's a great joy to be with you this afternoon. I hope we can keep the energy up after lunch and after a very full morning already that I think still has certainly me thinking about a lot of things that we heard and discussed this morning. I've already had the privilege of being on campus for a day, to be in a classroom, to meet early in the morning with students, to meet with your provost, to visit the Career Center, and to make connections there for how Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service can create opportunities for students and alumni as well in your career service with refugees and immigrants. And I have to say the energy, the questioning, the thoughtfulness of your reflection really are inspiring. And it's really made it a privilege to be here already for a day and yet still to have today. This evening I'll be back, I think, in this room for the film as well and conversation there, and to be at worship together with many of you tomorrow. And I'm looking forward to this panel and to the conversation that I hope it brings about. We've got some great presenters who I think will be a good complement and build on what we heard this morning, both from the keynote presentation and from the students who presented. And I want you to be ready to save your questions. We're going to do a little bit of a different format to make sure we hear from each of the panelists and then turn to questions after that. So if an early presenter sparks a question, jot it down so you don't forget it when 3 presenters later we're ready to come back for your questions. Well, you know, I woke up this morning, and though I was in Valparaiso, which is a new place for me to wake up, this morning wasn't so different for me from other mornings. Given the work that I do, I usually begin the day remembering the 60 million people in this world who are displaced from their homes, who've been driven from their homes through no choice of their own. And you saw even a picture of that, a little picture of that in the video over the lunchtime. More than 20 million of those 60 million people have crossed an international border seeking safety, and so they're considered refugees. More refugees than ever since records have been kept of global migration. And these brothers and sisters of ours are both courageous and desperate. They've sacrificed home and family, culture and language because a tent or a shack or an open field offers them more protection than the violence of their homeland or their hometown or city. And they've exchanged dreams for the future, for themselves and for their children, for the experience of thinking only about how they will survive that one day. Their resilience and ability to adapt are truly, truly remarkable. And their determination to reach safety, especially for their children, inspires me every day. It's, you know, sometimes the scale of this crisis is one that you feel can weigh down upon you, and yet to think about these individuals, what they have already achieved in seeking safety, their determination is what keeps me going. The world's refugees, whose names we don't know, most of whom we probably are never going to meet, are among the neighbors that God calls us to love and serve. Neighbors we don't know yet, but still are neighbors. And I certainly feel blessed to have the opportunity to be of some service, to make a difference in their lives. I also start each day thinking about the communities across this world that receive refugees. Amman, Jordan, and Cairo, Egypt, Lesbos, Greece, and Waldorf, Germany, Chicago, and Gary, and South Bend. I pray that these people and communities will be generous and kind and welcoming, that they will receive newcomers as they would wish to be received, and that they are open to the transformative experience of integrating refugees into their community. In the work that I do at LIRS and in my previous experience leading faith-based relief and development agencies work in Cambodia, and also later a global faith-based network doing advocacy, there are 4 things that I continue still to learn about and think about that I want to highlight as we prepare to hear from these speakers, and they connect to, I think in many cases, the presentations we heard this morning as well. The first is that when we put our beliefs, our values, and our faith into action in service to others, we must trust in the resilience and the God-given dignity of those we seek to serve. That's the antithesis of that first video we saw at lunch. Those we serve are so much more than clients or beneficiaries or aid recipients. They are our neighbors. They are brother and sister. And they have as much, perhaps even more, to teach us than we to teach them. One example I would share of this is the story, just briefly, of Nebi, who I met in Atlanta a couple of days ago. Nebi was originally from Eritrea. He was a Christian. He was arrested and jailed and tortured because of his faith. Eventually, he made an incredible journey to America. He went, I can't even remember the order, but through Uganda and Senegal and Cape Verde and Brazil, through Guatemala, Mexico, until he reached the United States, seeking safety. His welcome to this country was to be apprehended by Customs and Border Protection and incarcerated. He filed his claim for asylum. He was moved 3 times between different detention centers in America. He wasn't even quite sure where he was anymore, while he was swallowed up by this system. He maintained hope both because of his faith and because there were people, Lutherans in the Atlanta area, who drove 2 hours every week to go to visit him and other detainees at Stewart Detention Center. Today, he's been awarded asylum. He's anxious. In 2 years, he'll be eligible to become a U.S. citizen. He's a long-distance truck driver. In 3 years of work in this country, he's been to 45 states already. And he also goes back to detention centers to visit other detainees as part of his way of giving back. So Nebi, for me, is a great example of many who, in fact, gives as much as he has received in those who have been brother, sister, and present with him. The second theme I want to mention, and we heard it this morning as well, is that the scope of global humanitarian work, which sounds gigantic, is not only overseas. It is not just somewhere over there in that one country called Africa, but it is local. as well. The world's been made a smaller place because of the impact of globalization. Food and products move everywhere. Ideas and information flow across borders easily, as do people who are workers, who are tourists, who are students, and who are refugees. And our world in America is changing as well and beginning to reflect the rest of the world. One of the articles I've left on the back table and I shared with the class I visited yesterday is some recent summaries from some research that the Pew Center has done about the changing demographics in America. By 2065, there will be no ethnic majority in the United States of America. Whites will be less than 50% of the population of this country. And that diversity, which some see as loss or threat or reason to inspire fear, can also be embraced as a great blessing and richness that will benefit and only make this country stronger. The third theme I want to encourage you to keep in mind is the importance of innovation. And again, we heard about this in LIRS's presentation. Thank you for that. The practice of trying new things to solve problems in new ways, to make lives and the world a better place. This can come in the form of small things or big ideas. And perhaps, I believe, the most important innovation, or piece of innovation that can happen is what we learn from it. What we learn and how we share that, both from what works, but also what fails. I really, really encourage you in your own work and thinking and the journey you make vocationally after you graduate from Valpo is that you give as much attention to mistakes and failures as you do to your successes. They're not as fun to celebrate, I can tell you that, but they give a lot more opportunity for growth and to make a wide contribution to the world we live in. Let me give you just one example of what I consider a mistake or a failure in the work that we do in refugee resettlement. 30, 40, 50 years ago, when the United States was welcoming refugees to America, local congregations and groups and communities were able to sponsor refugee families. They were called, someone told a church or a group, we have this family, this is who's in it, these are their names, this is how old they are, this is where they've come from. Are you ready to take this family, to make them your neighbor, your family, and your congregation? And thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of congregations rose to this occasion to welcome refugee families. There was that deep personal connection. With time, though, that model was deemed to be imperfect, and that's probably true. Some refugees were treated better than others. Some refugees were preferred. While our congregation doesn't really want a single man, we'd like to have a family with children, preferably young children. Or, you know, things that were human nature, perhaps, but didn't seem to be quite fair or equitable in the process of welcoming refugees. So the system itself, through government regulation and law, changed. And refugees were resettled to the U.S. with a model that's much more professional in services for their first 3 months in this country. So that social service agencies are there with a caseworker and English language training and a host of other ways of assisting refugees as they begin their life here. But in that change, there was a loss, a big loss, a loss of connection to community. And though it was more equitable and more professional, at the same time, churches lost the sense of the importance of their being engaged. And refugees began their life in this country without an immediate circle of friends around them that they could know, who knew them, and who counted on them. So, out of best intentions, sometimes in this area of work come mistakes that can cause harm or lost opportunity. We have to learn from those lessons, and I think it's why, at least at LIRS and among some of our peer organizations, we see a reinvestment in engagement with congregations for their accompaniment of refugees as they begin anew in this country. Fourth and finally, the theme partly that I heard this morning, that's part of my own experience that I hope you'll reflect on, is how critical it is that we exercise our national and global citizenship. We must raise our voices to policymakers and others of influence, like large corporations. And we must empower those we serve to do the same, and not to do that solely on their behalf. Our work of service may change lives of individuals, of tens, hundreds, perhaps even 1,000 people. But if we utilize the experience of our service, what we've learned through that, and if we leverage the relationships, the network of relationships locally, nationally, and globally that we have, we can shape policy. We can change the systems that are unjust. And we can impact hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives. So I really want to just again encourage you to keep these four themes in mind. The importance of the humanity of those whom we serve, that they're an asset in the community, that local is also part of global humanitarian action, that innovation and learning from both success and mistakes is critical, and that advocacy for social change is absolutely imperative to this work. So, courageous journeys, whether it was of Mary and Joseph and the child Jesus, have always inspired us. I don't know about you, but as a child growing up, my favorite children's stories were those usually of courageous kids doing something amazing and being able to imagine. I mean, for my generation, it was a book called The Boxcar Children. For others, it's Harry Potter, and it goes on and on. But courageous journeys are something that constantly inspires us, and that is just as true as the stories of refugees and immigrants today.